Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Keir, and joining me as always is my co-host Austin Davidson.
Hello.
It is Season 5, Episode 43. As we are currently recording, there's a playoff game going on between the Buffalo Bills and the Indianapolis Colts, which we talked a little bit about on the last podcast. And we'll be spending today previewing Steelers and Browns Part 3, and we have our special guest, John Gehring, rejoining the show for the second time in the last 2 weeks and the third time this season. So it's great to have him back on. Talking Steelers and Browns again. First playoff game for the Cleveland Browns in 18 years. And it's indeed a very significant game. The Steelers hosting at Heinz Field the finale of what they're calling Super Wildcard Weekend. The first time there are six playoff games on the given weekend. So a lot of exciting football expected this weekend. A lot of question marks. Obviously there's Kevin Stefanski and Joel Bitonio with the coronavirus going around, and there's injury concerns. So there's a lot to be had with this game right now here, Austin. Starting from the Steelers' perspective, a game that they would have been favored in anyways, but I think one that has quickly become something that they had better win.
Yeah, with all the injuries to the Browns and the COVID list stuff, it's going to be really embarrassing, especially after the Steelers made fun of them for barely winning by 2 points last week. It'd be embarrassing to lose with your starters the next week when they're still dealing with COVID issues, and the Steelers literally don't have a designated player for this game when it comes to injury report. So the Steelers should win this one.
So let's talk a little bit about some housekeeping issues with the Steelers. First of all, the number one, probably the only person that's really going to miss this game is probably Joe Hayden. He would have to come off the COVID list by tomorrow morning, and that's assuming he tested negative today, which he very well may not have. So you lose him, you slide in Cameron Sutton to the starting role, and that means Justin Lane gets slid up into the number 4 cornerback role. Any thoughts as far as what the Steelers are losing with Joe Hayden and everyone else getting bumped up a spot?
No, I think Cameron Sutton can hold it down for Joe Hayden. Cameron Sutton does provide some things that Joe Hayden doesn't. While I prefer Joe Hayden to be there because he is our starting cornerback, I think Cameron Sutton can get the job done, at least for one playoff game.
Indeed, and there's also several other guys to keep an eye out for. So the window was open for guys like Matt Filer and Robert Spillane to potentially return off of injured reserve. They opened the practice window for them. There's currently only one roster spot available, so as far as who is more likely to return, I'd have to think it's Spillane because he's been on injured reserve a little longer, but it's possible that the Steelers could end up elevating both and releasing 2 players.
Yeah, it's easily that they could use both, but I think Spillane comes back because of the lack of depth at inside linebacker if they had to choose one. Also, there is that remote chance that Joe Hayden does get back, which in that case they'd have to cut. No, I'm sorry. They have an open roster spot right now. They're at 52, so they'd only have to cut one person at the moment. If Joe Hayden comes back, then they'd have to cut 2. But I think that Spillane is likely to come off on Sunday morning.
So what's the ideal usage for him, I guess, then? Because you've got then a 3-man rotation at inside linebacker, kind of like what we saw a couple years ago, or actually last year with Barron Williams and Devin Bush. And, I'm not sure who you think would wear the green dot, but I find it hard to believe that Spillane, who was wearing it before his injury, would go right back to wearing it and would be taking all the snaps. I'd be shocked if he plays more than 40.
Yeah, I think Vince Williams stays with the green dot, and he just rotates in with Avery Williamson. I think that they're going to use him in certain packages. I'm sure they're going to ease him back into it a little bit, but I do think that he plays.
And then as far as Williamson and Spillane and Williams goes, I think that having them rotate in is probably the best possible option you could hope for.
Yeah, having them rotate in and out would be ideal. Just having having more flexibility with your inside linebackers would be great.
And then as far as the offensive line goes, if Filer does return, how do you see that shaking out? Because obviously Filer, the question's Filer or Dotson at left guard, and Filer's versatility plus Dotson playing very well, I think would lead one to believe that Dotson would continue to start.
Yeah, I think Dotson remains starting at the left guard spot. Filer wasn't necessarily bad, but Dotson's just been playing really well in that spot, and I think that it just makes sense to keep him there going forward. Filer could still provide depth because he can play tackle, and obviously he was playing guard this year, so I think that activating him wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to give your team depth, because let's say like Chukwuma Okorafor goes down, you could plug in Matt Filer at right tackle because he's somewhat comfortable there. He played that all last season, so...
I'd say he was probably better there than he has been at left guard this season.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
All right, and then as far as the rest of the offensive line goes, I think if you have Filer there, you have an opportunity to use him as that extra offensive lineman that the Steelers love to use instead of a guy like Gerald Hawkins, and that'll basically give you 6 starting caliber offensive linemen right up front, and that should help the running game. Maybe if you have that guy paired with Vance McDonald, you could actually probably really do yourself some favors in the ground game. So I think that would be the best use of it. And on top of that, you might, I wouldn't do it for this game since this would be Filer's first game back. But if you wanted to take a chance, you could make just 7 of your typical 8 offensive linemen active, and that way you could have Hassenauer be the backup center, and Filer could play technically all positions, although he's really not a center, only on emergency basis. I think that if you wanted to potentially open up a spot for a guy like Josh Dobbs, that might be something you would consider. Although I will say that with Filer potentially coming off just this time, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, using Filer at the swing tackle position is an interesting concept, and I think that it would be a good idea. Not that Gerald Hawkins actually been solid at swing tackle, I feel like, but I mean, it is the difference of having 6 like actual starting caliber guys that have starting experience as offensive linemen on the field. So that'd definitely be an interesting concept if they do choose to make Filer, if they choose to activate Filer for this game. So, yeah, I'd like to see that if they do.
Let's talk a little bit about what was it? Sorry, kind of blank there. I lost my train of thought. Why don't we go to the other side as far as the Browns go, because they've got a bunch of different issues to go around right now. I mean, 4 of their 5 offensive linemen are either on the COVID list, being Joel Bitonio, and everyone else besides Jedrick Wills is on the injury report. Now, the only one that I think might not play is, I believe, Conklin. Conklin didn't practice at all on Friday. Everyone else was limited. So I think that could be quite a big area of concern for the Browns.
Yeah, Conklin's the one most at risk for sure because the first 2 practices were estimations because the Browns allowed practice. This one was for real, and Conklin can go, and that puts his status in danger. That would be a huge loss for them. Again, they're really weak at the tackle spot backups because they lost Chris Hubbard earlier in the year, so they were already down their swing tackle guy. So they don't really have much depth there. So Conklin not going would be very bad for them. Other than that, Terence Mitchell is like probably the second most player not the player with the highest chance of not playing because we don't even know what's going on with him. He got a questionable tag with a not injury related designation, and I have no idea what that means. He didn't practice on Friday. I couldn't find out why. So he is something to monitor as well, the cornerback, Terence Mitchell.
Elsewhere, as far as the offense for Cleveland goes, they're going to be already without Cadrell Hodge, and they've also got Donovan Peoples-Jones in concussion protocol. So there's a possibility that they will be without both of those guys, really kind of hampering their receiver group. It'll be mostly Rashard Higgins and Jarvis Landry, and that'll put a big onus on hopefully them getting back a guy like Harrison Bryant so that they can run legitimate 3 tight end sets, because when all 3 are on the field, they're all solid at least.
Yeah, for sure. It'd definitely help them that if they with the 3 tight end sets. They might have Ryan Blitzer for this game if Donovan Peoples-Jones doesn't clear concussion protocol, and Kadero Hodge, which I think he is, staying on the COVID list for this game. Mm-hmm. They might activate Ryan Switzer because he's now off the COVID list. He might be a practice squad elevation.
The Browns will also be missing Kevin Johnson and a whole bunch of coaches, including, obviously, Kevin Stefanski. They've also got a banged-up Sheldon Richardson in there as well. And Myles Garrett has a shoulder injury. He's questionable. He was also, I talked about this with John, he was not on the field at the end of the last game this past week. And he's been struggling ever since he got over the COVID. He's been seeing a breathing specialist. He's not at 100%, and he's still good, but that's something that is not settled. Something that's unsettling for the Browns.
Yeah, and coupling that with his shoulder injury going into this game, it's tough for him. It's going to be tough. I can't see the breathing issue being fixed in a week, so that is probably going to hinder them a little bit.
And news came out today that Denzel Ward is not going to be able to play in this game. We kept thinking he was going to be able to.
Yeah, it's like 12 days since he first got placed on the list, so that was a little bit bizarre to me. I thought after 14 days you'd be good. 14 days of the max, so essentially he hit the max. Like that's really unfortunate. That's really unlucky because I'm pretty sure I did the math right when I first thought it, is that was 12 days ago. So I don't know what the deal is. I don't know if I just am misinformed in that it could last longer than I was thinking. As far as I knew, you could only have COVID for at the maximum of 14 days.
Well, generally speaking. Sometimes there are rare cases where, especially with these pro athletes, where people will have them for longer. But usually, yeah, it's 14 days and you're done, roughly.
Okay, so it can go longer. Okay, yeah, well, he's very unlucky. That's very unlucky to be 12 days later and still have COVID.
And then some more positives for the Steelers front. They activated both tight end Eric Ebron and outside linebacker Cassius Marsh off the COVID list, who were close contacts at Joe Hayden's house, having, I believe, a New Year's party with his, or Christmas party with their kids. So they'll both be back. And that brings up a question I wanted to have answered regarding that Josh Dobbs package, because it would require making someone else inactive for this game. We talked a little bit about this before, but I would strongly consider sitting a guy like Jaron Elliott or Cassius Marsh in favor of Dobbs just for this game to help the short yardage package.
Yeah, I'm still about sitting Isaiah Buggs and Carlos Davis. I don't think you need them both. I think you could sit literally both of them.
So who would your lineman Who would your lineman be then? You got Tuitt, Hayward, and Alualu, and Wormley. Is that it?
Pretty much. That's all they needed last week, basically. They had those two guys play combined 16 snaps. They didn't even need them in a game where in a game where nothing mattered, and you're supposed to be playing like backups. It should have been giving your starters some time. So I'd roll with at least one of them being inactive.
Yeah, I think Buggs would be the guy inactive there. I find it hard to believe they'd make. I mean, let's think about this. You have an inactive list of 5, right? So let's say Buggs is 1, right? Buggs is 1. Who else would be? Who else could you look at? Let's say, what's his name? The new lineman Isadora would be number 2. Anthony McFarland would probably be 3. Deion Kane Deion Kane's on the practice squad, right?
He's on the practice squad at the moment.
Okay, I gotta find this roster because now this is something I'm actually curious about. All right.
Tegray Scales is someone you might make inactive.
He might be released for Spillane too, though.
Yeah, there's a chance that he doesn't stay on the roster yet.
Oh, I forgot about Henry Mondo. So you might be able to get away with making 2 linemen inactive.
Yeah, okay. Also, Anthony Coyle's on the active roster. I forgot about that.
So I'd make Coyle and maybe Isadora. All right, so let's go through this. McFarland, Coyle. Well, then again, if Filer's... See, part of it depends on if... Do we want to assume that Filer and Spillane are not coming back, or they are?
I don't know. That's up to interpretation. To me, I think Fire stays and Spillane comes back for this week. I think it's 1-1.
Deion Kane is on the active roster, so let's say Kane is one.
Oh, he is?
Yes, he is. Let's say Kane, McFarland, Coyle. We'll do Bugs, and let's assume Tegray Scales has been released. You could make either Elliott or Marsh inactive as your number 5. You can take your pick.
Huh. So, right. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So, certainly something that's a possibility, but the way things are shaping up in terms of the injury reports and COVID-related, I think this is shaping up about as well as it could for the Steelers and about as worse as it could be for the Browns.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at all the injuries, the COVID stuff, it's like, I mean, yeah, the Steelers are going to probably be without Chin, but other than that, it shouldn't be too bad for them. And compared to the Browns, the Steelers are in a pretty good spot going into this playoff game.
So let's talk about this game. Steelers and Browns, a very long history against each other, playing over the years through the 1940s. The Steelers holding a 77-60-1 record. At this point, obviously, they played last week. This will be the third time they've played this year. The third playoff game between the two teams in their history. They played once in 1994, the AFC divisional round, where the Steelers won 29-9. And obviously, the most recent playoff game for the Browns 18 years ago. A lot has been made about that game. A big comeback for the Steelers, the largest in team playoff history. Led by Tommy Maddox, the Steelers won 36-33. A total of 6,579 days ago. Something interesting I found in my study of that game, Browns quarterback Kelly Holcomb, who threw, I believe, 3 touchdowns and 429 yards on the day. That 429-yard total was the third highest in NFL history for a single playoff game at the time, and the most ever thrown by a losing quarterback. And at that time, since then, he's fallen from 3rd to 10th most passing yards in a single playoff game, showing you just how much the game has changed in the last 2 decades. And it's been surpassed by losing quarterbacks. Number 1 by Drew Brees, who threw in the 460s against the 49ers in 2011. Ben Roethlisberger in their most recent playoff game against the Jaguars back in 2017. And Tom Brady in Super Bowl 52 against the Philadelphia Eagles in 2018. So just something kind of interesting I wanted to get to there. Austin, do you have any thoughts before we get to our interviewee, John Gehring, and listen to his...
Not particularly.
Nope? All right. Well, why don't we listen to what John has to say about the Cleveland Browns. We'll be right back on the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. As we have, whenever the Steelers have played the Browns the last couple seasons, including last week, it is my pleasure to welcome back a friend of the show, John Gehring, to talk about the Browns as we look ahead to the Steelers and Browns Super Wild Card Weekend Sunday night game. So, John, welcome back to the show. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. I mean, get to be on your show twice in a row, 2 weeks in a row. That's really exciting stuff. And my Browns are in the playoffs for the first time since I was 4. So I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing, John?
Oh, it's fantastic. I mean, like I said, if that matchup were to occur, as I said last week, it would really be just spoiling us. And obviously you are doing so, and we very much appreciate it. So, yeah, the Browns, back in the playoffs since 2002. I think I was 6 years old at the time. It was one of my earliest football memories, that game between Pittsburgh and Cleveland 18 years ago. And it was really one for the ages, although unfortunately for your Browns, they came out on the wrong side of it and thus endured a very long stretch of frustrating football. But the turnaround from just 2017, now just 3 seasons ago, where the team went 0-16, some up and down since then, but this year an 11-win team finally back in the playoffs. You want to talk just briefly about what it means to have your team back in the playoffs for the first time in so long, playing such a meaningful game this late in the year?
Well, yeah, that's the first thing is playing meaningful games in December. I mean, that hasn't even happened in a decade. So that this season has been really, really exciting despite all these circumstances that are making things difficult. But it gives every terrible team a hope that doesn't take all that long is, as long as you might think to turn around an NFL team. Just takes one or two of the right pieces, and then the dominoes start to fall from there. And for the Browns, that's been the right quarterback in Baker Mayfield. Despite his ups and downs, he's still leading this team to the postseason appearance. The right head coach in Kevin Stefanski, and just the other pieces that you need, like this strong O-line and D-line. And it doesn't take that long to turn a team around, and here we are in the postseason, and all of a sudden the future beyond 2021 is also looking bright as well. So really exciting to be back.
Yeah, so why don't we talk about how it happened, first of all. Obviously, the two teams played last week, and I think it ended up being a little bit closer than we thought. It was assumed kind of that the Browns were going to be able to win, maybe not by a ton, but were able to be in control for most of the game, which they actually were. They were the better team most of the game. Held a 24-9 lead, but the Steelers made a bit of a comeback late in the game and nearly had a chance to tie it before a 2-point conversion was denied by the Browns defense. And the Browns had to hang on, but as they say, a win is a win. What do you think about the Browns' performance last game? Do you think it was a little jittery? Do you think it was just, I don't even know, like how can you attribute it? Because you saw some really good things from Cleveland, but obviously I think it goes without saying you want to see them perform a little bit better in crunch time, considering who the Steelers were not playing in that game.
Yeah, it was extremely clunky, and especially that second half, of course, after taking that 24-9 lead. Just, I don't want to say they let off the gas, because obviously they weren't thinking that way. This is the one game into the postseason, but they just got away from who they are, and that in play calling, being a little bit too aggressive with the play calls instead of just continuing to bleed the clock and run the ball, which was fairly successful. I know Chubb only had I don't have the exact number here, but he had only, I think, a few more than 20 carries, and Kareem Hunt wasn't really involved whatsoever, and Mayfield was dropping back and throwing too many passes. And then on defense, some key penalties and just overall sloppiness and a lack of a pass rush later on just allowed the Steelers to get back in the game. And boy, for every Browns fan, that was a frightening experience, and certainly a huge relief to break up that pass on the two-point conversion attempt and finally recover the onside kick, too, because it seemed like even that was a challenge, and come away with that victory. It was hard-fought. It was ugly and awkward and bizarre, but somehow the Browns were able to get it done, and I think that's all that matters. I don't think they're really taking some of those negatives into this week. I think it's kind of just a clean slate, which is an encouraging thing.
That is what the playoffs is all about, John, entering with a clean slate. Nothing that you did in the regular season matters. But that being said, as we turn our attention to the third matchup between these two teams, something that does not happen very often. In fact, the two teams' history meeting in the playoffs, this is only the third time that it's happened. Obviously, it happened 18 years ago in that memorable wild card game in 2003 of January. And then there was one additional matchup in the postseason for the 1994 season, back when Bill Belichick was the head coach of the Browns, going way back. So when you play a team for a third time, obviously there's a lot of familiarity between divisional opponents. There isn't really an intimidation factor because the teams are so familiar with each other. But what do you think can be taken away from the previous two matchups as you go looking into a third between the Steelers and Browns, where it's like, okay, maybe the Steelers do this thing well? What have you seen from the two games so far that gives you kind of thoughts on what you might see from the Browns, either differently or the same this time around?
Well, after that first matchup, and the Steelers just dominated that game, I knew I wasn't able to even tune in until the second quarter, and by that point it was getting out of hand already. But this past matchup, I don't want to say it's a throwaway. There is some things that we can take away, like I think especially in the play calling, we have to stick to who this team is fundamentally on offense. But at the same time, you can't hold too much weight on this past game without so many of Pittsburgh's starters in the game. But I think just these two previous games can really tell both teams a lot. And each team, of course, has won one. And just as far as their playing styles and Pittsburgh's dominant defense and just aggressive defense, which I'm sure you can speak to, they were able to get a strong pass rush on Mayfield, stop the run in that first game, really stymie that Browns offense that was on such a roll coming into that first Pittsburgh-Cleveland matchup. And I think the Browns just have to be prepared for that and just have to have a game plan to overcome that. But besides that, I think being the third matchup, I mean, I know that definitely is a big deal, and that doesn't happen hardly ever, as you noted. I do think, though, that this is a very different matchup than it was last week for obvious reasons, with the Steelers starters being back, and that's going to make it sort of a new matchup with a much different game plan, more resembling the adjustments that this team needs to make from that first Pittsburgh loss, which was really ugly.
So yeah, let's obviously talk about some of the developments that's going on. It would not be a successful Browns season making it to the playoffs finally if there weren't more roadblocks. It seems like such a Browns thing, John, that COVID-19 has infected the team, and we knew that there were a couple players like Denzel Ward that were not able to play last week, but this week it's infected the head coach Kevin Stefanski and left guard Joel Bitonio, who, I mean, you can tell me, as far as I know that Wyatt Teller's been the highest grade PFF offensive lineman, but Bitonio has been the staple on that offensive line since Joe Thomas retired. He's been the guy since then, and he's one of the best guards in the league. And having him out is going to be tough, and obviously having your head coach not being able to call plays, which I was kind of surprised that there wasn't anything in place where he might be able to call plays remotely. I thought that was something they were doing in college, but I digress. You want to talk to me a little bit about what the loss of both of those guys means for this team?
It's huge on that offensive line. I mean, without Bitonio, you and I were talking before the show, and you hinted at Michael Dunn, who's, not even played the offensive snap and offensive snap yet this season, and that's what we're looking at now in a postseason game. It's going to be difficult to replace the effectiveness there of Bitonio, and not only in the rushing attack, but pass protecting too. The Steelers, these pass rushers, my goodness, and obviously they have one of the best pass rushes in the league, and that leads to so many turnovers and just horrible situations for opposing offenses. And so I worry about how much time Mayfield is going to have in the backfield tomorrow night because of this injury on the offensive line. That's going to hurt. Stefanski being out is definitely a factor too. I mean, the special teams coordinator now takes over, and that's just bizarre. I think it would be an easier roadblock to overcome if this were during the regular season, when maybe these teams weren't playing for the first playoff game in 18 years. But it still is something that I think the Browns can overcome if their other assistant coaches can get on the same page and kind of work this game as a committee. I think that's a very important thing. And if they could just stay true to who they are on both sides of the ball, they will be able to overcome that aspect of it. But it's going to be very, very difficult with all of those COVID list injuries. I believe there's 8 of them right now, and we don't know if maybe one or two of them can return. But yeah, the Browns are decimated on the O-line and in the secondary, and those are two very vulnerable areas that Pittsburgh can attack, and that's a huge concern.
So I wanted to stick with Stefanski not being able to coach this game. He's still going to be able to put together a game plan, and I kind of think therein lies the key for both of these teams, and that's starting fast. Obviously, Pittsburgh has had struggles on offense lately this year, and with the strength of their team being their defense, they want to be that aggressive team that you were talking about, attacking opposing offenses from a strong position of having a lead to defend. Meanwhile, the Browns being that classic power running team that we've seen this year, one of the best along with the Ravens and Titans in the way that they run the ball down the field. you've got a strong play action game with Baker Mayfield. I would imagine that starting strong is probably the number one key for this game above anything else, just because of the way both offenses have played, A, this year, and B, as of late, depending on the team we're talking about.
Yeah, for that reason, and also just because that's always the Browns' game plan. I mean, starting fast on offense, especially in the ground game, to set up that play-action pass. Now that the Browns have some wide receivers at their disposal, last week that was kind of nice. It was like, oh, wow, wide receivers. That's the foreign concept after that loss to the Jets there where they were missing their top 4 receivers. But with that option now, and against a strong Pittsburgh secondary, yes, but I think the Browns can still set up a lot of play-action plays if they have success on the ground early on in this game. And then, for Pittsburgh, defensively for the Browns against Pittsburgh's offense, if they get off to a really strong start offensively, then you force the Browns into their more aggressive offense and more pass-heavy offense, and that's never a good thing because Pittsburgh's pass rush is so strong. So I think overall, just as these matchups play out, and Pittsburgh's defense being so incredibly strong, combined with Cleveland's offensive line now being totally, really decimated without, Conklin and Bitonio, it's going to be really a tough go here for the team if they start slow. But I guess the same goes for Pittsburgh, knowing that their offense has had its struggle too, right? I mean, especially on the ground, they need to get off to a fast start to get rid of those suspicions that maybe they're in for another one of these very low output affairs on offense.
Indeed. I'll get to that in a little bit, but let's stick with the Browns offense right now. You talked a little bit about that banged-up offensive line. We touched on Joel Bitonio not being able to play, but every single starter on this team, as far as offensive line goes, is on the injury report, excluding Bitonio, who's already on the COVID list. Jack Conklin has had a knee issue, so he's questionable. J.C. Tretter's got a knee issue. He's questionable. Wyatt Teller's got an ankle. He's questionable, too. And actually, I take that back. Only Jedrick Wills is not on there. So that's 3 of the 5 guys on the injury report and an additional on COVID. I would think that from what I'm seeing as far as the participation goes, they should be able to play. The only one I'd have a concern about is Conklin because he didn't practice on Friday. Even though they're not at full strength, obviously having them would be key. But I was thinking that one thing that might help is the fact that the Browns went with heavy personnel a lot in this past game, and they're getting their third tight end back, Harrison Bryant. And I think I love the Browns tight ends, John, to be quite honest with you. Hooper's been a guy I've liked for a long time, and I think Bryant's played really well, and Njoku's kind of a wild card too. Could you talk about maybe how they might be utilized in the sense that they could probably help this running game by being on the field a little more in the matchups that they create?
Sure, and it's really great that Brian's going to be back. I mean, coming off of the COVID list, you wonder how effective he's going to be, and you wonder how, how many snaps that he's going to get and what his role is going to be. But regardless, having that third tight end is huge, and what it allows the Browns to do is play a lot of these 2 tight end sets, and that's really effective for this team, especially early on in games with the rushing attack, is when they put 2 tight ends, they bookend the offensive line with tight ends, whether it be Hooper, Njoku, or Bryant. One is on each side, and then they do what I believe is 12 personnel a lot, and the one back and the 2 out wide. And then what you see is just a ground and pound run game, and it's been really effective for the Browns to just hand the ball to Chubb over and over again and let those tight ends continue to create holes. Now, Pittsburgh's defense is a different animal than a lot of these defenses that they ran ball effectively against this season. But with those tight ends, it aids that beat-up offensive line that, like you mentioned, I don't know if Conklin's going to be able to go. In fact, I think he's truly questionable, and I don't know. If I were a betting person, I might even bet against him considering the experience of Kendall Lamb and combined with the fact that he hasn't practiced. I just think that's not looking good for Conklin. But yeah, the rest of that offensive line, even when they are able to go, Tretter's should be able to go, but he's beat up. And that's going to really be difficult for a very physical type of game plan that the Browns want to establish here. But like you said, I think having those tight ends is a huge key for that run blocking and also pass catching. I mean, honestly, the red zone targets, those are very, very important. You got to score in the red zone, and that's what the Browns have in Austin Hooper and David Njoku as well.
So let's keep talking about those weapons. Obviously, how do you say his first name? Hodge? How do you say his name? Do you know?
I'm sorry, Cordell Hodge.
Cordell Hodge, yeah. So we were talking before the podcast about how whenever he plays Pittsburgh, he always ends up with like just 2 catches, but he's got like 50, 60 yards on him. He's going to be out in this game. Yeah. He's a downfield threat. And as we know, Donovan Peoples-Jones is in concussion protocol after that hit he took last weekend. He finished with a limited practice on Friday, and Jarvis Landry was full with the hip. So there's a little bit of question marks regarding the receivers. I know there was an incident with Rashard Higgins, I believe, earlier this week, something about drag racing. I didn't know a ton about that, but he's not on the injury report.
Yeah,
yeah,
right. That was a heck of on Tuesday. Spending your day off that way during COVID, not a great idea.
In any case, as far as I know, he's going to be available, right?
Yeah, he's still going to be available. That's a non-injury incident there, but yes, he should be available. But like you said, the rest of that receiver group is somewhat decimated, and Peoples-Jones not looking too good because you know how concussion protocol is.
Mm-hmm. So obviously Landry is kind of the number one target there, the guy that's reliable in all situations. But with the loss of guys like Hodge and Peoples-Jones, do you think that means we're going to see even more targets to a guy like Jarvis Landry and Rashard Higgins, or do you think that the Browns are going to try to get their running backs, especially Kareem Hunt, and we already talked about the tight ends, more involved? Do you think it's a more receiver, tight end-centric attack, or do you think that we could see more use of the running backs in this game as far as the pass offense goes? So just if you could, John, could you talk to me a little bit about what those losses at receiver could mean for the passing attack, and if it means the running backs could be more featured, or maybe just the receivers that will be there get the ball a little bit more?
I think the game plan stays the same as it normally would, which means that those receivers being out are going to lead to more opportunities for the receivers that are in. But what I will say, and I'm really glad that you brought up the tight end before even talking about the receivers, because honestly, these tight ends might end up with more, or just as many targets as the receivers that are on this roster right now that are active. But I think that they run the ball the same amount as they normally would, and then they just play with who they have on the exterior, because that's what they've done all year. And you see in the Jets game, the Browns were without their top 4 receivers, right? All the household names, so to speak, were out, and you're throwing to, Johnny Jones or whoever, on the outside there that nobody had ever even heard of, yet Baker still dropped back 25 times and threw out those many passes. So I think those receivers will still get the same opportunities and even elevated opportunities if Peoples-Jones is in fact out. And of course, Hodge being out, that downfield threat. But I do think that it will open up a lot for the tight ends, which is really a good thing for this Browns team, who needs a physical receiver down the field to make some plays and a big red zone target like an Austin Hooper, a Njoku, and even a Harrison Bryant, too. So I think the passing game will still be a huge part of this game.
Let's go to the other side of the ball for the Browns, a unit that has, like you said, a very good defensive front as far as the defensive line goes. They took a massive, massive loss on Sunday with the loss of Olivier Vernon due to an Achilles tear. He's since had surgery on that. But as far as the Browns go, Vernon being out and now Ronnie Harrison going on the COVID-19 list means that PFF has two of the Browns' top 5 graded defensive players will not play in this playoff game Sunday night. Can you talk to me a little bit first about how good Olivier Vernon has been in his second season with the Browns and what his loss means for a guy like Myles Garrett, who, even though he's played really well this year, it's clear that he's still seemingly feeling the effects of COVID-19 after having gotten over it. Because he, as far as I've heard, you can kind of expand on this. I've heard that he's seen a breathing specialist, and I don't think he was out there on like the last drive because he was winded. It's just strange to see.
Very strange, and the virus just affects everybody so differently. It's a bizarre thing, but I mean, don't get us wrong. I think he's still absolutely effective, maybe on a slightly more limited basis. But if they pace him throughout the game, pace his snaps, he won't play every snap. He really won't. I don't think anyway, unless he's had a miraculous turnaround these past few days. But yeah, the respiratory element of it is definitely something that's been an obstacle. But at the same time, I do think that he will be a major factor in this game. As for Vernon, boy, that hurts. Vernon has played so well. He's been the complement to Garrett and Richardson and Ogunjobi up on that front four, which is, I think, one of the most underrated front fours besides Garrett in all of football, because I think everybody thinks, oh, Brown's defense, Myles Garrett. But Sheldon Richardson, Logan Joby, and Olivier Vernon had lights out years. But the good news is Porter Gustin can come in. He's played some quality snaps for this team on that defense. I think Porter Gustin can play a strong game, at least hold down that defensive end position and not let any major breakthroughs or lapses in that running defense happen. He's not as much of a pass rusher, but he can stop the run, and I think they'll be able to fill that hole, but it certainly would be so much better if Vernon could play. I'm not too concerned, but yeah, a little bit disappointed.
Yeah, so you mentioned him and Adrian Claiborne, as far as I can tell, seem to be the two guys off the edge that are backups. Gustin was actually a guy that I looked at coming out of the draft a couple years back. I thought he was pretty solid, and I'm glad to see that he is producing at least well enough right now. Could be a big game for him on Sunday. And you touched on Garrett, so yeah, that front line for the defense, certainly one of the more unheralded groups outside of Garrett. But obviously Vernon was having a really good year. Sheldon Richardson is one of those guys that really, I think people almost forget that he's with the Browns, but he's been the last 2 years really effective. And again, he put up 6 sacks this year from the interior position. That's a pretty solid number. Let's talk a little bit about some of the reinforcements that the Browns are going to possibly get back here. It was noted, understandably, that the Steelers were resting a lot of starters in that first game last week. However, it's also worth noting that Denzel Ward, Malcolm Smith, I believe Andrew Sandejo, on top of others now, including Ronnie Harrison on the COVID list. There's a bunch of different guys there, including Smith and Sandejo, two of the top leading tacklers on the Browns team, that are going to be eligible to come off. We're still not sure, I believe, if they're off yet, and I believe B.J. Goodson was the other. So there's a lot of different names that either are going to come off the list or have the chance to come off. Those could be massive reinforcements for a team that did just lose a guy like Vernon and Ronnie Harrison.
Yeah, Sandejo did just come off. He's no longer on that COVID list, so he should be good to go, obviously. But we still are waiting for the linebacker that you just mentioned, Malcolm Smith. Is that the one that you just mentioned?
Yep, former Super Bowl MVP.
He's still on the. Yeah, he's still on the list. And of course, Denzel Ward is that he's going to be missing as well, and he's had kind of a rough campaign here. But it'll be nice to have those guys back in the secondary. The secondary coming into the season was like the extreme weak point of this team. It was what we all worried about, and drafting Grant Delpit was like one of what was supposed to be this huge reinforcement, that this season has not really gone quite that way. And there are guys back there who are just not NFL starters, and I'm assuming we're going to see a good amount of Sheldrick Redwine again, and we've just seen I'm good for him for getting in so many snaps and playing, somewhat effectively, but he's just not an NFL starter. And that's a problem when a non-NFL starter plays 10 games in one of your most important positions at safety. But hoping that these guys don't have to make too many tackles against the Steelers' rush game that they really need to shut down up front. And I'm hoping they can just keep that passing game in check. The Steelers will make some big plays on offense through the passing game. I'm confident of it. But I think if these guys can avoid some large penalties that give Pittsburgh 3 yards and chunk plays, and I think on third down, if they can really tighten up on in that back end, that's going to be the key. Just trying to do too much, but doing just enough to slow the potent Pittsburgh passing attack down.
So let me ask you, who on the Pittsburgh offense is most concerning to you if you're the Browns' defensive coordinator in this game, and how do you think the Browns are going to try to take that away?
Chase Claypool, I think, is the most concerning. I think Claypool on the outside has become one of the strongest weapons in the league receiving, and he has the combination of size and speed that doesn't bode well for the Browns secondary, who are undersized and, I mean, I don't want to say slow, but not the fastest. So I think Claypool as a downfield threat is frightening to me because the Steelers know that they're going to have to make some chunk plays to beat this Browns team. But they can. They definitely can. And the Browns need to keep him in check. Obviously, Smith-Schuster is another guy that can make some great plays, and you worry about him too. He doesn't quite have the size, I believe. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it just seems that Claypool is the more daunting figure on the outside. But that passing attack in general does scare me, because I think that if they don't have huge plays, they could get 3 huge plays through penalties out of desperation from that overmatched Browns secondary, and I just have a hard time believing that the Browns will shut them down because they're just so overmatched.
Last thing I wanted to mention, the Juju Smith-Schuster you talked about had a comment which I would like to point out that he was kind of repeating something that Mike Tomlin says a lot. So he was kind of more so quoting him, although the fact of the matter is he was asked about playing the Browns again, and his quote was, this is the one that was pulled, so it needs some context added. However, he did say, I think they're still the same Browns I play every year. I think they're nameless gray faces, which is the Tomlinism, if you will. They have a couple of good players on their team, but at the end of the day, I don't know. The Browns is what he said. I don't know if you saw that quote. I'm sure the Browns players have, and I'm curious if you think that what he said and the way it's being kind of portrayed makes you think that the Browns are going to be a little more fired up going into this one, or do you think it won't have much of an impact at all?
It definitely is bulletin board material. I mean, when you say anything like that, I understand where he's coming from, to be completely honest with you, because I think the comment, as you said, you got to take some context and realize that it's just a Tomlinism. And yeah, Schuster's got a little bit of an edge to him, and that's what makes him a fun player. I mean, let's be honest. But I don't hear that and go, like, I hate you, Juju Smith-Schuster. I hear it and I go, yeah, that kind of makes sense. I mean, I think what he's trying to get across is that their preparation is going to be the same, because these guys are, what's that Tomlinism, nameless, faceless, gray people. I think that's just an approach to the game that Tomlin has taken that's obviously been so effective since the Steelers. This is one of the most dominant dynasties under the time of Tomlin that we've ever seen in the AFC North. So I think that's more where the comment's coming from, but at the same time, yeah, it's good. It's great bulletin board material for this Browns team that has a little bit of an attitude and amongst themselves. So I think that, I guess, could be beneficial to the Browns in a small, unmeasurable way, if they apply it the right way, if they use it as a motivating factor. But in the end, it's just talk, and I think it happens almost every week, and I'm just not really too concerned about that. I just hope the Browns taken aback by that too much. But I don't think the comment was meant in the way that it's been taken.
John, that was probably the most reasonable and well thought out response I ever could have thought in regards to something like that. I have probably about 200 people on Twitter that have their own thoughts on it that completely disagree with us, but I'm glad that you said what you said because I agree. Again, the context is important, but if the Browns do go out there and win, they're going to be talking about it because it is bulletin board material, and that will be something that is remembered about this playoff game if that is what ultimately ends up happening. So, that being said, we've kind of overviewed a little bit of everything here. Third time these two teams have played. It's been very happy to have you back on, John. I want you to one final time give me kind of the down low as far as what you think this game sets up to be and how you think it's going to go. The final score prediction and all that good stuff. So if you could do us all a favor and tell us what you think about this one.
Yeah, this one's going to be fun. Honestly, I don't say this to discredit the Steelers at all. I think the Steelers, despite having that rocky end of the regular season with those 3 out of 4 losses there, despite that, they're a Super Bowl contender. I mean, I really think they are. The rushing attack is the most concerning one, but you guys are legitimate Super Bowl contenders because of that defense, because of that quarterback, because of your head coach. That's always going to put you in position. Now, can they beat the Chiefs or whatever? I don't know. We'll see if we even get there. But as far as this game is concerned, boy, obviously I just so want to pick the Cleveland Browns, and I have a lot of faith in what the Browns can do to overcome adversity, and they have all season. They've their way into the playoffs despite almost collapsing after a 15-point lead was nearly blown. So the Browns have a lot going for them and a lot of reason to play their hearts out. They're going to leave everything out there on the field. They have that attitude now. As you said, they have that bulletin board material. They have everything that they need to compete with the Steelers, and that's what I think they will do. I think they will compete very hard with the Steelers. I think this will be a close game into the fourth quarter. I'm not going to be able to get to sleep until at least 2 a.m. on Sunday night because it's going to be a really intense game. But I think the Steelers just, in the end, unfortunately, if I'm going to look at it objectively, I think the Steelers have the experience, the firepower, and just the overall ability, especially on defense, to come away with this one on top. I'm going to say, if you want this final score prediction, I'm going to say 31-27 in a close back-and-forth affair that ends with a big play by the Steelers with less than 3 minutes to go, and then the Browns aren't able to respond on offense, and that's how the game ends. It's going to be tight, but I'm going to put the Steelers in this one.
That sounds a lot like the way the last playoff game between these two teams ended. So, obviously, I'm expecting it'll be a good one, and I'm looking forward to it. And that being said, John, let me ask you one more additional thing. If the Browns can get past this game and they're going into the next round, it would be a road game, possibly against either the Chiefs or Bills, potentially. I was curious as to what you thought, how far you thought this team might be able to go as they probably get some reinforcements back like Kevin Stefanski and Bitonio. Do you think this team has the legs to potentially win multiple playoff games, maybe even go as far as the Super Bowl?
Yes, and I've definitely I've looked at this, obviously, as a Browns fan. You start looking ahead, and we shouldn't because we have our hands full this week, obviously. But the Browns win. I'm thinking the Buffalo Bills are going to beat Indianapolis. That's just another prediction. We'll see if that's even relevant. But I think that'll make the Browns go to Kansas City if they were to win. And that would definitely be a challenge, but as Kansas City has also had some late season struggles. I think a lot of times the postseason is about getting hot at the right time. I don't really want to say the Browns are hot after last week necessarily, but I think they can also start in the postseason with some wild card weekend momentum. And if they're able to get past Pittsburgh, I think getting those reinforcements are going to make things even easier. And I don't want to say that I would pick the Browns to beat the Chiefs, but I would certainly be intrigued, and I'd like that matchup a little bit more, maybe even than this Pittsburgh matchup, if that were to happen, because it's just all about getting hot at that right time, and the Browns could make some noise in this postseason, which would obviously just, completely, Cleveland would just lose it if that were to be the case. But 1 week at a time, this is certainly a huge challenge for the Browns against a division rival.
John, thank you so much for joining me today and talking Steelers Browns for the third time. I've said it multiple times before, but it's always much appreciated when you get to come on and talk Browns with us. We're always lucky to get to talk to you twice a year, and this year was extra special being able to do it 3 different times. And obviously, with the game being Sunday night, it's now almost 11 o'clock on Saturday of Super Wildcard Weekend. Enjoy the games today, and I'll see you tomorrow night as we get to watch the game together, man.
I'm looking forward to that. No hard feelings either way. It's just going to be a really fun game, and thanks for having me on again. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Alrighty, man. So I guess until next season, we'll have you back on. Maybe we'll have you on sometime around the draft, just because I'm sure there's always something interesting to talk about. Maybe we can talk about who each team ends up taking and kind of how the 2021 season is kind of shaping up to look ahead to the 2021 season is kind of shaping up to be. But anyways, until next time, John, thank you so much, and have a great day. And like I said, I'll see you tomorrow, man. Take care.
Sounds good, John. Thank you so much.
All right. Special thanks to John Gehring for joining us again. Austin, we just coming out the other side of this, we're talking Steelers and Browns and the outlook for Pittsburgh in this game. Everything, I think, is setting up to work out pretty well for them, but there are big questions on offense. Ben Roethlisberger having the week off along with Marquise Pouncey. A team that offensively, if you want to throw out the last game because there were backups in, whatever. But besides the second half of the Colts game, there really was not a lot going on for this offense for the previous month beforehand. How comfortable are you with this offense's ability to move the ball, considering the fact that they really only had 2 good quarters out of their last, 12?
Frankly, I'm not. I really think that the offense is really, really struggling. I think that they need to adopt what they did in this past game against the Browns, where they were targeting more downfield. I mean, they were without Denzel Ward and not Terence Mitchell. They were without Denzel Ward and then Evan Johnson again in this game. So you could attack them deep. Their safeties, they might not have Ronnie Harrison. There's word that Ronnie Harrison might be able to play this game. We're going to have to see, because apparently he tested negative. They're going to monitor and see if he tested negative again tomorrow, and he might be able to available. But still, you could attack these defensive backs that they have. They are not very good against the pass. Like, they really, really struggle against it. I mean, they give up a lot of passing yards per game. They give up 247.6 per game, which is 22nd in the league. So you can target downfield against these guys. They're going to be vulnerable. You just have to find the right reads. And Mason Rudolph was able to, so I expect Roethlisberger to do the same. I expect him to use his arm and actually get the ball downfield, make the correct reads, and attack these guys where they're weak, and they're weak in their secondary by a lot.
And we've seen over the last few weeks that the issue with the Steelers passing game was at least mitigated by a certain extent to the fact that they were actually designing plays to go deeper, which is something that we hadn't seen. We actually have seen them attempt to dial up the deep pass, or at least the intermediate passes, more often the last few weeks, starting with that Bengals game. It just didn't work. But for 3 weeks now, we've seen it.
It's just about execution now. It's just about executing whether the players can get it done together. A lot of it's been on Ben Roethlisberger, and I am worried. I am concerned coming off a week without practicing and stuff and having to get ready for this game. I feel like it's kind of tough to say Steelers come out slow after this stuff when every single week every single game this year, the offenses come out slow, but it concerns me. I feel like you can't really start slower than 3 and out every week. But I have concerns that nothing has changed and they're going to start real slow again.
Yeah, I think that has to be the number one concern for this team. You've got what seemingly appears to be the more talent in this game than your opponent. You've got better injury and COVID luck than they do. I mean, they don't have their head coach. They're, in some respects, seemingly happy enough to just make it there for the first time in almost 2 decades. They're playing with house money, and with you having such issues with slow starts, and the way the Browns play, being big on that ground game and struggling to come from behind with deep downfield passing and drop back passing game, I think that makes it quite apparent that for the Browns to win, they have to basically stay within reach. And the best way to stay within reach is to, A, either start fast so that you're ahead of them, or B, you keep them, close enough. And the Steelers have had big issues with starting fast, as evidenced by the fact that I was thinking on that opening drive last week, like, hey, they got a first down. Like, that's how low the bar is right now. Other than that Titans game, which was the black sheep of opening drives for us the last 2 years, where they scored 2 touchdowns on their first 2 drives, it's been awful. It's just there's not much to say about it. But I'll say what I said ahead of the Colts game. I don't have a ton of faith, but I'm still hopeful that this downfield passing game can be a little bit better. Maybe Ben needed that week to get a little more healthier if it was still an issue for him. They finally got a bit of a bye week there, and maybe we'll get a chance to see Ben, after having thrown successfully downfield against the Colts and then seeing Mason Rudolph do it successfully against the Browns. I am hopeful that we're going to see at least a little more aggression this time around.
Yeah, and the thing is, do you guys think that Ben Roethlisberger is better than Mason Rudolph? The answer is going to be yes. I hope so, from most of you. So he should be able to do the same things that Mason Rudolph did, and that's going to be enough to win. If he could just target downfield like Mason Rudolph did, not all the time, but it's enough where you're getting those big chunk plays against a really, bust-up secondary. I think that the Steelers should be on track to win this game if that happens.
And here's the thing, they might be getting guys like Malcolm Smith back and Andrew Sendejo, but they just lost Olivier Vernon, who has been the last few games their most productive pass rusher. They lost him for the season. This is a Browns team that's missing a lot of pieces. The Steelers should be able to attack downfield, and if Ben Roethlisberger can't do it, then I got to be honest, after what I saw last weekend, maybe he isn't the best option for this team to win games, looking ahead to next season. But I think that he still can. Everything we saw 2 weeks ago in the second half indicates that he can. I just think it's a matter of, does he want to? Or does he feel like he can stand in and take it? And if he's not going to do it now, when is he going to do it? The Super Bowl? I mean, I would think that now is when you start pulling out all the stops. Now is when you make all the plays that if you were saving yourself for, now is when you do it.
Exactly. There's nothing else to wait on. And it's going to be interesting watching this game. If Ben Roethlisberger can't get the ball down the field, we're going to be able to say that Mason Rudolph was better at getting the ball down the field in the 2020 season than Ben Roethlisberger was, which would be insane because, you look at just the number of, I think it's 40-yard plays or 30-yard plays. Ben Roethlisberger has 4 on the season. Mason Rudolph was able to get 3 last week. So it's going to tell us a lot if Ben Roethlisberger struggles in this game against a depleted secondary again.
So the table has been set for him to basically perform well. He should be able to. And if he can't, I think this offense if he goes into a shell, then I think that's a huge problem for the offense because I think that's the best chance for the running game to succeed too. And I will say, if they can back him off and they can run the ball, I think they'll be able to run the ball a little better if that's the case. 2 of our best games on the ground have been against the Browns this season, including what we saw at times last week. I still think that they should be able to, and once you back them off a bit, then you can take the underneath stuff, which is exactly what we saw in the Colts game from Roethlisberger. I don't have a problem with dinking and dunking it down the field once you've opened it up, but it's trying too hard to beat that dead horse early on that I'm worried that this team is going to just beat their head against the wall for no reason at all.
You need to at least make them scared of something. You need to prove that you can get the ball downfield so that they can back off, then you can throw underneath. Like you said, that's exactly what happened in the Colts game. The Colts weren't respecting the deep ball at first. Then the deep ball started going. And then they were like, well, then the short passing game started working because they had to actually worry about something else. So it's just how I view it.
Your hopes for the run game?
50% successful run rate.
What about, so I'm sure you feel like I do that if they can get an intermediate or deeper pass game going, they should be in much better shape to run successfully.
I think so. I think I'm looking for that successful run rate, and from the running backs, I want to see James Conner continue to run more passing routes, more wide receiver routes. You know what I'm saying?
I understand. Yep. Absolutely.
Because I think that helps too. Because again, it's not about whether it's super successful. It's about teams having to actually be afraid that, okay, they might pass to James Conner. We might have to have a guy worrying about him. I think that helps open stuff up.
This is also a team that hasn't forced a ton of turnovers this year, just 21 on the season, most of them coming from fumbles. So John said it, their secondary, a lot of those guys, especially now with Denzel Ward out, and they might be without Terence Mitchell too, a lot of guys that are not NFL starting caliber, according to him. So something to keep in mind, what you want to see from the Steelers. You should be able to move the ball through the passing game in this one, and you should be able to then take advantage on the ground after that. So I think that, realistically speaking, there should be no reason the Steelers shouldn't be able to put up at least 24 points.
Yeah, exactly. It's... Oh, wow. I'm sorry. I saw what just happened in the Bills game, and I got super distracted. But, we're both watching, like, simultaneously. For me, it's a 4th and goal from the 4. It's 10-7 Indy. And I'm guessing you're, 30 seconds ahead of me then? Yeah, they just ran the 4th down play. I said...
The drop city.
Yeah, it just goes off the fingertips. I didn't want to spoil it while you hadn't seen it yet. I thought he should have came down with that. But, yeah, no, the Steelers' offense should be... It's so sad because I feel like it's not going to happen. But there's offense based on everything they're given, based on how healthy they are, based on having a week off, based on how the Browns are looking, based on how the Browns are injured and the COVID list and the lack of coaches. The offense should be able to move in this game. I mean, just look at it. They have so many people that are injured on their injury report, and they should be. And these are guys that are going to have to play. And then imagine Denzel Ward, Kevin Johnson, and possibly Terence Mitchell. You're down 3 cornerbacks in the game. They shouldn't be able to keep up at all. Like it should be the offense should be able to do whatever they want. I mean, the one good thing you could say that's difference over the last week is now they have B.J. Goodson, who's their starting inside linebacker, but. Honestly, does that make a difference? Is that when they lost Olivier Vernon and they're still as banged up as they are, their defensive backs are still in shambles at the moment.
I'm going to change my mind. That's not a drop by Michael Pittman. That's just not a good throw. Also, Why didn't they kick a field goal there? I know you only go up by 6, but I think that they had all the momentum. They were in control of this game, and I think that they just gave it back to Buffalo.
Yeah, I guess trying to be aggressive, I guess. I guess they know that the Bills' offense is potent.
If the Bills come back and win this game, you can circle that play. Anyways, let's look at the other side now. For the Browns, number one issue, as is always the case when you play them, their ability to run the ball. I know they'll be minus. They're going to be start. So John and I talked about this. We're not sure exactly who's going to start. They have a guy named Lamb who's a backup tackle that could start there. He's played one career snap at tackle. Or you've got a guy that has played only, he's a rookie, he's only played, his name is Dunn, he's only played special team snaps this year, 24 in total, and he hasn't played a single offensive snap in his career. So that's what you're looking at left guard going up against Cam Hayward most of the day. So that's a concern. But the rest of the line, even though they're mostly banged up, they are relatively intact, and they ran the ball for pretty good success against the Steelers last week, including that opening drive where Nick Chubb took it to the house from near midfield. The Steelers' run defense over the second half of the season, not nearly as good as it was in the first half. That's concerning to me.
And not even close. The breakdown in the run game has been pretty tough. I mean, last week you could say you had backups in, but still, like, a big reason why that run happened was because of starter and Minkah Fitzpatrick. I mean, you still have a bunch of starters on the field. The defensive line isn't as nasty, but you still have Tyson Alualu, Stephon Tuitt, then you still have Vince Williams playing on the field, and Minkah Fitzpatrick, and you hope for better. And like you said, it's just not been as good as the second half. They were at one point first or second best rushing yards per game defense. Now they've dropped, I think, all the way to what? I think 11.
10th. They're tied for 10th, but it's a cataclysmic drop compared to where they were. They were like 65 yards through the first half of the season.
Exactly. Like they've dropped. They started giving up a lot of yards per game in that regard. So it is concerning because the starting defense is part of the blame for the second half. Not the last game, obviously, but regardless, the way I view it is you're going up against the number one rushing offense, and not statistically number one, but one of the best. I think that they have one of the best rushing offenses with their offensive line and their two running backs that they have, and then they have pretty solid blocking tight ends. You need to be able to restrict that. You need to get them down early and force them to throw, because they are a not as good passing offense at all. They're not even really close. In terms of yards per game, they are getting 221.2 passing yards per game, which is 24th in the league. So you have to get the stops early, let the offense go up, and then you want to force them into passing situations because they will struggle. They're not used to pass a lot in a game or for a lot of yardage in a game. So run game is what you're really trying to stop here.
My apologies if anyone heard the loud beeping. We had a smoke detector going off, but we're okay. We're okay. I'm sorry, Austin. Could you? We were talking about the Browns' running game, right?
Yeah. So all I said was that the Steelers need to focus on stopping that run game because it's the most important to their offense. And if you could stop them, let the offense do its thing, and get them into a situation where they have to pass, that's ideal because their offense isn't as good in passing situations. They're 24th in the league in passing yards per game. They rely a lot more on the rush, so I think stopping them on the ground is ideal.
Yeah, so, I mean, you think about it, the best way to take the Browns off, the Browns' bread and butter, which is their rushing attack, away from them, is to get up early, like we were talking about. If you can't do that, what you need at least is their defense to hold on and slow down the running game long enough for your team to get ahead. And if you can do that and take away their ability to run the football, you're going to do yourself a lot of favors, because Baker Mayfield's best asset as a passer is being used on those play-action boots, those rollouts, where he can get to use his legs and can escape the pocket. And when he does that, that's when he's at his most dangerous. If you force him to just drop back and make throws, that's when he's going to be a little more vulnerable. So that's what you want to see from the Steelers' defense. Just hold on long enough for your team to get a lead. And then as far as the pass rush goes, this group ate up the Browns' offensive line last week. And now they're getting 2 All-Pros back. It should really bode well for them. They've sacked Mayfield 4 times last week. I think that this could be a big day for the pass rush, so long as they can keep that running game in check.
Plus 2 All-Pros and minus 1 All-Pro to the Browns, because Joel Bitonio is a All-Pro this year. So this should be a really good game for the pass rush, as you said. It's just everything should be in their corner. It's like you said, literally it's all about stopping the run. If you could stop the run and force them into passing situations and go up on them so that they have to pass, the Steelers should be being pretty.
One thing I would like to point out is that with the COVID-19 Cadrell Hodge and injured Donovan Peoples-Jones, there's certainly a possibility, especially with Harrison Bryant maybe coming back, that the Browns end up using a lot of heavier personnel. And we saw this last week where the Browns came out in 2 tight ends and they spread the field, kind of like what the Patriots did a lot back in the day. And if you do that, you have to keep the Steelers' defense in base, and that means you've got outside linebackers dropping into coverage. So be on the lookout. Hopefully Keith Butler's doing whatever he can to try to keep his linebackers off of receivers, but just keep in mind, Austin, I think we might see some of that at times on Sunday.
Yeah, we might have to. We're hoping for the best, though.
I will say that I'd rather see a bunch of receivers on the field, because they've only got, if Peoples-Jones is out, they've only got 2 solid receivers right now. It's their tight ends and running backs that concern me more in this one.
You're telling me Ryan Switzer isn't an All-Pro like Cole Beasley?
I mean, the Steelers' yards per carry this year is pretty much in line with his yards per catch. In fact, I'd say Juju, like Juju's yards per catch has been maligned a lot this year. He's still like double where Ryan Switzer was at last year.
Yeah, it's not good. Yeah, their wide receiver situation is not in a good spot.
Special teams. Ray McLeod, I think, overall has done a really nice job this year. He's had his moments, though. I'm worried about him fumbling. Just hang on to that ball.
Yeah, I think that. What did they call him? They called him. Oh, Danny Smith was talking about the return game, and he was talking about him, and they called him something. I can't remember what he exactly did, but it was good. They basically said, like, sometimes he tries to do too much. But, I think that McLeod, as long as he doesn't fumble, he'll have a good game.
Speaking of Danny Smith, he has COVID-19, so he won't be coaching in this game.
He does?
I was pretty sure I saw that he did. Let me check this.
He was talking about... See, what I'm thinking you saw, because I thought the same thing when I saw it, was... he talked about having COVID-19 and how he had no hobbies, and he was... While he had it 2 weeks ago, he was bored.
Oh, that's right. Never mind. I take that back.
No, it's not your fault, because whoever put it out said... the way they phrased it made it sound like he had COVID. I thought the same exact thing when I saw that exact tweet.
Well, in any case, let's move on then. I guess as far as we can tell, Chris Boswell's okay, right?
He has no injury designation, so I guess, but I think that's a lie. I think them not giving him a designation is a straight up lie. I don't know. After not being able to kick last week and not logging a full practice this week, our starting limited, I think that's a nagging injury that's bothering him. He's likely to have surgery in the offseason for this kind of injury. I can't imagine he doesn't. I mean, for this game, I guess he's okay.
It's concerning, though. Definitely makes you wonder.
I mean, he's needed 2 weeks off at random points because the same hip injury. Like, it's got to be bothering him. It's got to be flaring up. So I think he has to get surgery on it for something like that.
Matthew Wright, would you have given any thought to maybe playing him instead this week, giving Boswell a week off again?
I don't think so. I think if your players want to play, if they're healthy enough, you play your best players, and Chris Boswell is your best player. Matthew Wright for field goals has been great. PAT is great. It's been perfect. The kickoffs are suffering a little bit with him. You see his lack of leg strength a lot on the kickoffs, so I prefer Boswell there.
All right, shall we move into our wild card part 2 picks?
Sure.
So the Bills-Colts game is going on right now. Did you want to talk about the second game between the Rams and Seahawks? I couldn't remember if we talked about the rest of Saturday's games or not.
We did not. But I encourage everyone to check out our Twitter because this episode will not be up in time for the start of that, or at least likely it might be. We put our picks out on Twitter at @stronger_steals. So check out there. We will talk about the Buccaneers. I think we should talk about the Buccaneers football team because the episode should be up by 8 o'clock.
Okay. Well, the line is Tampa Bay -8 at the Washington football team. I'm going to go outside the lines here and pick Washington to upset Tampa Bay here. I really don't have a lot to go off that other than the Washington defense is really good. I still have a lot of concerns about the offense for Washington, but I don't know. The last 2 times a 7-win team has made the playoffs, they've won their home playoff game. So for that reason, I'll pick them to win.
Wasn't this 2 times ago Beastquake? They beat the Saints?
It was 10 years ago.
Yeah, dude. Okay. So I'm also picking Washington football team +8. I'm going to have the Buccaneers winning 2013, though. I think that this is a closer game than some people imagine. I think that the football team's defense is a little underrated. They actually overtook the Steelers for the second best yards per game, defensive-wise, this past week. So They're actually really solid. And with Mike Evans not at 100%, he is likely to play, or they're saying he is going to play. Without him being at 100%, I think that the football team can keep this closer than people think. So Buccaneers win 20-13.
Let's move into Sunday's game. The first one is an AFC matchup between the Ravens, who are red hot, and the Titans, who barely beat the Texans last week. The Ravens are favored by 3.5 on the road. Remember, the Titans did beat them not only in the playoffs last year, but also this season in overtime on a Derrick Henry run. I think whatever the number is as far as the score, you hammer the over on this. This is one where the Titans' defense is awful. The Ravens just ran for 400 yards last week. And the Ravens' defense, although it's better, I like to think that the Titans and Derrick Henry, the 2,000-yard rusher, will be able to pile up a decent amount of rushing yards in this one. This could be a kind of prolific game for rushing attacks, and you have to like the way Lamar Jackson's playing right now, and I would think that a guy like Ryan Tannehill could have success in this one too.
For me, I'm going to have the Ravens winning 31-27 and covering. I think that they're hotter at the moment. The Titans have really, really been struggling. They've had the same exact problem that the Steelers have had, where they can't get going until the second half. And they need a whole half to get going on offense, and their defense just isn't very good, so they get put into bigger holes. The Steelers, that's the one thing with the Steelers, the defense kind of keeps the Steelers from falling into a terrible hole. The Titans' defense just doesn't have a pass rush to it. It's just not very good, and they're easily able to get passed on. Their cornerbacks haven't been playing very well. I am going to pick the Ravens to win 31-27 and cover. I don't think that the Titans can come back from a first half deficit.
I'm going to take the Ravens to win 41-40. I think a last-second Justin Tucker field goal will give them the win. Should be pretty close, though. I think that this will be probably the most exciting, entertaining game of the week, in my opinion. Then the second game on Sunday is the 8-8 Bears at the 12-4 Saints. New Orleans is getting 10 at home. These two teams met for an overtime game earlier this season in Chicago. But that being said, even though the Saints' offense has been kind of hit and miss this year, I think that they are far more talented than the Bears, who have been just not good this year. And even though Mitchell Trubisky played well at the end of the season, I'm just quite frankly not convinced, to be honest with you. Facing a really good defense in the Saints, I think he will get exposed. So I got the Saints winning 23-10 and therefore covering, by the way.
Okay. So for me, I don't like the Bears' chances in this game. I think this is probably the most boring game of the week. I think that the Saints win 33-10 in a blowout victory. I know that earlier in the year it was 26-26. I'm sorry, it was 26-23 and it went into overtime. But I don't think the Saints let that happen again. Michael Thomas should be back. Alvin Kamara said he's playing. So, said see you Sunday, even though he's on the COVID reserve. So I'm going to take that as he is going to come off COVID reserve tomorrow. I think that the Saints win and win big, 33-10.
Some big NFL news to get to. Houston Texans quarterback Deshaun Watson is really unhappy with the organization and could request a trade due to the fact that he was apparently promised by owner Cal McNair that Watson would be kind of involved in the hiring process for a general manager and head coach. And when they hired Nick Caserio, he was never even contacted. So apparently they're trying to talk to him, and he's not trying to answer back.
Yeah, that's not good for your one-star player you have. The Texans are in a really, really bad place where they have no draft capital, have no cap space. They are obviously now their quarterback is bad at the rest of the thing. They're in a really bad spot. They're set up to be bad for a very long time. Honestly, with that being said, as much as it sucks, I trade Watson. You're not going anywhere with him. I don't think you. It's not because of him. He is great. I mean, look at the numbers. If you take him away from that team, he's an MVP candidate, and that wasn't enough. That was to get 4 wins. The rest of the team is bad, and there's nothing they could do. You can't say, okay, well they could hit good in the draft. Yeah, you have to hope them to hit good in the draft in the third round and later. That's what you're hoping for. That's what you have to rely on. they're not getting any free agents. The cap is likely going down, or it's just not growing, so they don't have more extra cap space. They're not in a much better cap situation than the Steelers. They're in trouble. I think you trade Watson. I mean, it's literally Watson was your future, but they messed up everything. They really, really screwed up everything with the trades they made. So overall, I think you should, before it gets too bad, before he starts, because I don't know if he force himself out. But if he starts forcing himself out and his value goes down, they're in trouble. A scenario where I thought would be good for both teams involved, trading Watson, I thought trades to the Jets would make sense. So the Jets would trade their first this year, the Seahawks first year, 2021 second, so their second year. Next year's second, 2022 third, and also Sam Darnold. Give them a quarterback back that's cheap for Deshaun Watson, which is still undervaluing Deshaun Watson, but with a guy, if he wants to leave, lets the Texans get either Fields or Wilson, another quarterback, lets them reset. They get draft picks. They get a little bit of cap space. I'd have to look at the cap situation with trading Watson. I'd have to see what that looked like. But also, Watson actually has a no-trade clause, so that's something to consider. But I'm sure if he wants to go, he will write in that he will waive that trade clause. I think that as stupid as it sounds, you should never trade a Hall of Fame caliber or great caliber quarterback. The Texans are in such a bad position that I think they should.
I don't know. I just think that considering how he played this past year, I just think that it's hard to. You'd have to get an unreal haul for me to consider trading him, because you're trading a known commodity for something that's not known. And we've seen every year that just because a lot of quarterbacks get drafted in the first round, they're usually not always that good. Like, half the time they're good and half the time they're not. So,
yeah, it's not Watson for me. It's literally the rest of the team. There's nothing they can do. They had their hands tied. Nick Caserio took over a dumpster fire team that he literally basically had no choice to do anything other than maybe cutting some players and making some choices like that. There's no build, because Watson can't play better. He can, but Watson already played at a elite level. This is an MVP caliber season. He's on the Texans, but there's nothing they can add. That's how I view it. It's just they're not going anywhere. They need something. They need either space or draft capital or something to be able to go anywhere. And the only way they're doing that really is if because they don't even have guys that they really trade for much. I mean, you can think about J.J. Watt might be worth a little bit, but he's on a downturn. He's getting older. Like, how much is he going to be worth? Honestly, trading DeAndre Hopkins for a second-round pick is still a thing ever for them. They should have gotten at least a first-round pick for that. It would have given them at least something. They're in a bad spot.
Yeah, I just the one argument I think you could definitely make is that he's at the peak of his value and he could regress next year. So that would be my kind of one argument for it. But I think that generally speaking, you hang on to your franchise quarterback, even if he's not playing all that great. Or not. That's not what I meant.
Yeah.
Even if well, I guess that stands. Although it's not really what I meant to say. But what I mean is that they have the quarterback in place. Even if it takes a couple of years, I think that you have to try to keep him, because starting over means you're bottoming out, and I think that that's pretty hard to sell a fan base on when you've got a guy that played like a top 3 quarterback. I just think that's hard.
Yeah,
and
but he's also wants to leave.
Maybe
that's part of it. He doesn't want to be there.
Maybe. We've heard reports. We don't know for sure if that's true, though. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Now, I will say if he does want to leave, you can at least explore it, but he also did just sign a contract last year. I know why he signed it, because it's money, but I think that was a big mistake, signing that contract.
Yeah, but he likely would have been franchise tagged anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
Really no choice. He was stuck there regardless.
Mm-hmm. So, in any case, we'll see how that develops over the coming months. Anything further you wanted to mention as far as the NFL goes? We got the Bills and Colts going right now at halftime.
I think we're good.
Alrighty. Let's get into X Factors and bold predictions. Who is going to be the most important for for the Steelers as we go into this Browns game?
So for the offense, we talked about getting going early is very important. So Randy Fichtner, I think that his script is going to be very important. He has to do something different than the past 24 games. And actually, I guess reignite whatever happened in the game, figure that out again. So I'm making him the X factor because getting going early is going to be a big deal in this game. Because if you get going early, make the Browns play from behind, they're not going to be able to come back. Then on defense, I have Cameron Sutton stepping in for Joe Hayden. I think that he could be the difference maker. He's likely to be lined up on the wide receiver one a few times. I mean, we'll have to see. If they use that heavy package, it's going to be to say who's on who. But I think Cameron Sutton stepping in for Joe Hayden is going to be a big deal in this game. Who are your X factors?
I'm going to go with Chase Claypool. He led the team in receiving last week, and his deep ball reception against the Colts kind of signaled the turnaround for the Steelers' offense over the last couple weeks. So I think that he could present a huge matchup problem with Denzel Ward out of this game. I think the Steelers should go to him early and often. And on defense, I have Cameron Hayward going up against either Dunn or Lamb. I think is going to be I think, a good option for the Steelers defense. I mean, you got an All-Pro going up against a guy that has played either 1 or 0 career snaps at left guard. So I mean, like you said, that the Steelers are adding two All-Pros to their defense, and the Browns are taking one away directly where the All-Pro for the Steelers is entering. So the Steelers should be able to dominate in that one particular area, and I think Hayward could wreck the game. And I think hopefully for the Steelers, you think that he should have a big game. And if they're going to double up on him, which they should, I think you can expect big games from other Steelers players as a result of it. So those are my X factors. And as far as my bold predictions go, I think the Steelers are going to open this game really hot. I think the Steelers are going to score touchdowns on their first 2 possessions, which is actually, I'm now realizing what yours are, Austin. I kind of just one-upped you without even realizing it.
That's fine. I'll take it. I got something else.
I was going to say you could go extra bold and say the Steelers score touchdowns on their first 3 possessions. When was the last time that happened? I wonder.
I have no idea. Ought to be like 2015.
Long time. But anyways, I'll take the Steelers scoring 2 touchdowns on their first 2 possessions like they did in Tennessee. I'll give Chase Claypool a 200-yard receiving game and Cam Hayward to finish with a whopping 10 tackles and a sack.
Well, for me, I'm going to have Cameron Sutton recording an interception and 3 pass breakups in this game. And as a random one, I have the Steelers going unpenalized in the first half. Then, not super bold, just more weird. I don't think any more touchdowns in this game.
All right, so how do you think this game is going to go and who's going to win and by how much? The Steelers are favored currently by 6 points.
I mean, apart from something cataclysmic, the Steelers should be able to handle this team. Their offense is reliant on the run game. If the Steelers could shut down the run game, I think they're in a good spot. The offense has been struggling, but this is a good team to go against because their secondary is so messed up. They have so many injuries and stuff. I have the Steelers winning 28-17. I think that the Steelers, like you said, should have no problems putting up at least 24 points. I think that the Browns are going to struggle to put up 17. Put up 20, I mean. How about you?
Yeah, I think that the big thing for the Steelers is to just not make mistakes, do not turn the football over, and just don't allow those long, explosive runs. The Browns just need to stay ahead of the chains, and if you can slow them down long enough to get a lead, you should be in pretty good shape. I don't like the Browns' chances of coming back against this defense. You should be able to get really good pressure on Baker Mayfield, and offensively just push the ball down the field a little bit and do it successfully enough so that they can back off and you can work on that dink and dunk game. I do like the Steelers in this one. I think there's too many things going in their favor to not like them in this one. I think the Steelers get going early and they'll win 33-20 and therefore cover. So I like the Steelers to move on to the second round, Austin.
Yeah, me too. I think it should be good. I think we'll make it to the second round.
Alrighty. With that in mind, any final thoughts before we wrap this one up?
Oh, no, I think we're good.
Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, thank you as always for listening to this super wild card weekend edition of the Stronger Than Steel podcast as we talk Steelers and Browns. Special thanks to John Gehring again for joining us for the third time this season. Always much appreciated to have him back on the show. And we'll be watching the Browns game tomorrow. And as always, if you have any questions about the show, please email us at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. Check out our episodes posted on SoundCloud and YouTube under the name Stronger Than Steel Podcast. And check out our website, strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com. Austin, thanks so much for joining me today, and enjoy the game on Sunday.
You too, man.
All right, until next time, thank you for listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.